Iran is now openly threatening to launch a missile strike against Ukraine and promises harsh retaliation. The reason is the Ukrainian operation in the Caspian Sea. On July 25th, the Security Service of Ukraine struck a Russian missile boat and 2 vessels there, which are under international sanctions and were used to transport military cargo between Iran and Russia. Iran stated that a sailor was killed on one of the vessels and another was wounded. And after that, as they say, things started to escalate. The head of Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Abbas Araghchi, issued a direct threat to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Pro-Iranian Telegram channels have already posted a map showing the range of Iranian missiles, hinting that they might strike. And Iranian parliament member Ebrahim Azizi stated that Ukraine, quote, will soon understand the price for what it has done. Volodymyr Zelensky responded calmly but firmly enough. Iranians and North Koreans are already fighting against Ukraine, just in a different form. Here's the main question we'll honestly discuss today. What is really behind these threats? Is Iran actually capable of physically striking Ukraine? Or are these just rhetoric? And why are Western analysts already calling dragging Ukraine into the Iranian conflict the second step toward a new world war? My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are moving towards the mark of 300,000 subscribers, so I will be grateful for every subscription. So, I'll start with what exactly was stated in Iran, because the rhetoric there has been escalating. The first to speak was Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. He accused Ukraine of striking the vessel, calling it a blatant violation of the UN Charter. And pay attention to the wording, there's no evidence provided at all. He claimed that the order to strike was allegedly given by Israel, trying to drag Europe into this war. Well, the logic, is so dumb that I don't even know how to comment on it. Well, the hint that, Volodymyr Zelensky is Jewish means that Israel gave him the order to attack the Iranian ship, which he supposedly did. But Araghchi forgot to mention that Iran supplies military goods to Russia, which then attacks Ukraine, and Iran does this through the Caspian Sea. Araghchi called on the UN Security Council, the European Union, and the international community to take action against Ukraine and hold those responsible for organizing this strike accountable. He directly warned that this strike, quote, cannot go unanswered. And then, less official but more aggressive Iranian voices joined in. Iranian parliament member Ebrahim Azizi stated that Iran will not leave actions directed against it unanswered, and quote, Ukraine will soon understand this. Well, this statement was immediately taken as a hint that Iran is preparing a direct strike against Ukraine. Meanwhile, pro-Iranian Telegram channels went even further. They started spreading a map showing the range of Iranian missiles and openly threatened strikes against Ukraine. The Middle Eastern analytical channel Middle East Spectator addressed Volodymyr Zelensky directly with, I quote, a subtle jab. A subtle reminder that the entire territory of Ukraine is within the range of Iranian ballistic missiles, including the super-heavy Khorramshahr 4 missiles. At the same time, for the sake of objectivity, I want to note one very important point. Officially, Tehran has not announced preparations for a missile strike on Ukraine and most likely will not announce it. All that exists at the state level are threats, and some talk about responding somehow. Specific information about missiles comes from Iranian deputies and Telegram channels, not from official military statements. Volodymyr Zelensky, by the way, responded quite calmly. In an interview with the British TV channel Sky News, Volodymyr Zelensky stated that, in fact, Iran's attack on Ukraine has already happened, just in a different form. Quote, we have to be honest. The Iranians and North Koreans have already attacked us. And then Zelensky reminded us exactly how. Back in the first year of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Iran supplied Russia with thousands of Shahed drones and then provided licenses for their production. Both countries, Iran and the DPRK, supplied drones to the Kremlin, rockets, 155mm artillery shells throughout the full-scale invasion. Without any warnings, and as they now claim in Tehran, provocations from Kyiv. Plus, Zelensky brought up the 10,000 North Korean soldiers already involved in the war against Ukraine. So Zelensky's logic is as follows. Iran has already been fighting against Ukraine for several years through proxies. Russia kills Ukrainians every night with its Shahed drones. So talking about Iran as a victim is just ridiculous. At the same time, Zelensky wasn't boasting, to be fair. He admitted that they should be careful and do everything possible to prevent the opening of a new front. According to him, readiness for the possibility that these threats from Iran could escalate is needed right now. That is, the president takes the threats seriously, but, as they say, without panic. Well, now the main question is Iran actually capable of striking Ukraine? Here I rely on military experts, not on emotions or panic. So let's figure it out. Relying on military experts. Let's start with a sober assessment of what's happening. For example, military expert and former spokesperson of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Vladislav Seleznev, says directly that Iran is unlikely to launch a direct strike on Ukraine. And its threats may remain merely loud statements, as has happened before. But Seleznev also explains the technical side, and that's important too. Iran really does have ballistic missiles capable of covering such distances and reaching Ukraine. The problem lies elsewhere. Their trajectory would pass through the territory of third countries, for example, through Turkey. That is, in order to reach Ukraine, an Iranian missile would have to fly over several countries. And this alone creates huge diplomatic and military problems for Iran, because it actually draws these countries into the conflict. They can't just ignore it and say, we don't see an Iranian missile flying. That's impossible. They will be forced to respond somehow, either by shooting it down or issuing a diplomatic note of protest. Well, at the very least, that's it. Now let's talk specifically about the arsenal. The publication Defense Express analyzes exactly what Iran could theoretically use to reach Ukraine. Iran has medium-range ballistic missiles, and the most dangerous one is called Karam-Shar. Their range is allegedly 4,000 kilometers, and theoretically they could reach the ports of Odessa. But the key point here is that its alleged 4,000-kilometer range is purely theoretical, because no one has ever seen this missile in action. This is just a statement from the Iranians and Russians that there is a Karam-Shar missile, and it has a range of 4,000 kilometers. Therefore, if you ignore all this bravado rhetoric from Tehran about Ukraine striking on Israel's orders to drag all of Europe into a war against Iran, then the only question is about the means with which Iran could theoretically attack Ukraine. The issue is about actual abilities, not desire. And those are already severely limited for Iran by geography and logistics. And there's another argument why Iran is unlikely to spend missiles on Ukraine. Iran is currently at war with the United States of America. Its ballistic missiles are the main trump card against American military bases in the Persian Gulf and against Israel. To expend a scarce and expensive arsenal on a strike against Ukraine, which you still need to reach by flying over third countries, is strategically pointless when these same missiles are needed on your own front. But it's worth discussing separately why Iran is reacting so sharply to the events in the Caspian Sea. Because Ukraine has hit a very sensitive spot. The point of the security service of Ukraine's operation in the Caspian Sea is not just to sink a couple of ships there, not just to show that we can strike this far, no. The SBU struck a specific military supply channel between Iran and Russia. The damaged ships Port Olia 2 and Begay are vessels that were specifically transporting military cargo from Iran to Russia. That is, through the very logistics by which Iran has been supplying the Russian army with drones and components for years. That's exactly why Tehran reacted so strongly. Ukraine has exposed and destroyed the mechanism by which Iran helps kill Ukrainians. And Iran's reaction is actually an admission that Ukraine hit the target exactly. At the same time, Western media are already framing this topic more broadly. They say that the SBU strike in the Caspian Sea is part of something much, much bigger. And now, Financial Times columnist Gideon Reichman wrote that the conflict between Ukraine and Iran could become the second step toward a new world war. His logic is as follows. There are 3 wars right now. These are currently the world's biggest. The war in Ukraine, the one in the Middle East, and the potential war in Asia around Taiwan don't directly intersect. So they're out there somewhere, 3 separate stories. But according to Rahman, it's possible that they could merge into one global conflict. It was the incident in the Caspian Sea, where Ukraine and Iran became direct adversaries, that he cites as an example of how separate wars are beginning to merge into one big war. Rahman also points out a structural problem. It is still difficult to identify a single bloc that could oppose Russia and its allies. And China, he adds, has real ambitions to displace the United States of America from its position as the most powerful country in the world. And he reminds us of the historical pattern that the desire of a rising power to take the place of the dominant world power has always led to major wars in the past. Right now, China is the one vying for that role. That is, as he calls it, the Caspian incident is not just a story of Ukraine versus Iran, or Iran threatening Ukraine, and so on. This is the point where, as they say, the Ukrainian, Middle Eastern, and Asian fronts are becoming entangled in a single confrontation, which looks as follows. On one side, we have Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. And on the other side, the United States of America, Europe, and their allies. And then, Western media add the final key detail, which shows the whole. I'd say the situation's ambiguity. Against this backdrop, Trump, against the backdrop of Iran threatening Ukraine, and it's already obvious that Ukraine, let's be honest, is also to some extent helping Donald Trump. Because if we disrupt supplies in the Caspian Sea, then we're hurting not only Russia, we're also hurting Iran as well. And against this backdrop, Donald Trump stated that he trusts Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping not to help Iran. Here is his quote. President Xi Jinping at our recent meeting in Beijing told me that under no circumstances would China transfer or sell weapons to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this also applies to Chinese companies. Vladimir Putin also said that he would not sell weapons to Iran. I think you know that I trust them. Well, today, July 27, Trump was asked, what do you think about Zelensky's words? About the fact that Russia at the very least shared intelligence with the Iranians so they could accurately strike American military bases? And Trump responded to this, I don't really believe it, but I'll ask Putin if he gave that information. Well, at the very least, that made me smile. I mean, just imagine, they tell Trump, listen, maniac Putin is deceiving you. He's plotting against you, he's helping your opponent. He says, I'll ask Putin if that's true. Well, how does he think Putin would respond? Oh, damn, I've been exposed. Yes, that's exactly right. Of course, he'll tell them, no, that's not true. Sometimes I'm surprised by Trump's naivety. But here, another inconsistency comes to light. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth has openly stated that China and Russia, through their actions, are still supporting Iran. Moscow could have provided Tehran with intelligence for targeting strikes or technologies that improved the accuracy of Iranian drones. Moreover, according to Pete Hegseth, Russia could likely have been involved in selecting targets for Iran. Well, I mean, the situation is completely absurd. Alright, Zelensky, fine, but Trump's own Secretary of Defense and Intelligence say that Russia and China are helping Iran. And Trump says, I trust Putin and Xi Jinping, and if there are any questions, I'll ask Vladimir Putin personally if that's true. And this trust is a direct threat to us. Because if Trump turns a blind eye to the Moscow-Tehran-Beijing nexus, then he also doesn't see that an attack on Ukraine from Iran would essentially be a continuation of the same Russian war, just from a different direction. Bottom line, Iran is threatening Ukraine with retaliation for the strike on ships in the Caspian Sea that were carrying military cargo for Russia. The threats are escalating, from Minister Arakchi himself to Telegram channels showing maps of the range of Iranian missiles. But it is still important to realistically assess and state that a direct strike on Ukraine is unlikely. Technically, Iranian missiles could reach Odessa, but their trajectory passes through third countries, and Iran itself is currently using up its missile arsenal in its war with the Americans. The main thing you need to understand, first of all, Iran has been fighting against Ukraine for a long time, with its Shaheds, which Russia uses to strike Ukrainian cities. So Iran's outrage is pure hypocrisy. Secondly, the Ukrainian strike on the Caspian was a direct hit on the military supply channel between Tehran and Moscow. And Iran's fury only confirms this. Thirdly, and this is the most alarming part, Western analysts have already seen in this incident a sign of how the separate wars in Ukraine, the Middle East, and Asia are slowly starting to converge into one global conflict where on one side are Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, and on the other side are the US, Europe, and their allies. So yes, we can't afford to relax, and it's better to be prepared for an escalation right now. And it's better to be overly cautious and, be prepared even if this escalation doesn't happen than for it to happen and for us to be completely unprepared. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.